Oh, such a clutch off-season pickup, Dave.
I was worried we'd bring back the same team.
I meant those blackout motorized shades.
Blinds.com made it crazy affordable to replace our old blinds.
Hard to install?
No, it's easy. I installed these and then got some for my mom. She talked to a design consultant for free and scheduled a professional measure and install.
Hall of Fame son.
They're the #1 online retailer of custom window coverings in the world.
Blinds.com is the GOAT.
Shop Blinds.com right now and get up to 45% off select styles, plus a professional measure. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Well, weekend and a beautiful Saturday afternoon. Appreciate so much your listening to the show. We have a great audience. By the way, if you're not getting the Unleash Prosperity daily, what we call our hotline, why not? Why aren't you getting it? All you need to do is just go to unleashprosperity.com and sign up. It is free. I'm not selling you anything, folks. It is absolutely free, costs you nothing. I think you'll enjoy it. I know one of the guys who reads the hotline most mornings is my good friend Chip Roy, the congressman from Texas. But just go to unleashprosperity.com, sign up. If you don't like it, we find most people really love it. But if you don't like it, you can just unsubscribe and we'll stop bothering you. But I hope you will get that. And I hope you'll also consider getting my new book with Art Laffer called The Trump Economic Miracle, and what a miracle it is turning out to be. So let me turn to my friend Chip Roy from Texas. Chip, thanks so much for joining on a Saturday afternoon.
Steve, great to be on the show. Great to have your friendship. I mean, we've known each other for, I think, like 25 years, and appreciate all you do.
Well, you too. Chip, how many terms has this been? Four? Is this your fourth term? How many?
I'm starting my fourth term. That's right. I was elected in 2018 for my first term in Congress.
And where are you in Texas?
So I represent the Hill Country, the best part of the state, which is between Austin and San Antonio. I represent.
Oh, I love that. That strip. Sorry, Chip. About 9 months ago, I did the drive from Austin to San Antonio. That area is booming.
It is booming. It is exploding. Hays County, where I live, which is southwest of Austin, area called Dripping Springs, Driftwood, fastest growing county in America. And we've got a bunch of growth here. Comal County, New Braunfels. I represent Luckenbach from the famous song with Fredericksburg, a lot of the old German communities. So it's an interesting mix and beautiful hill country. And best part of the best state and the best country in the world, as I always say.
So, it's hard to argue with that, given what's happening with the absolute boom in Texas. I think the people in Florida might argue a little bit with you, but it's been a race now for 10 or 20 years to see whether it's going to be Florida or Texas that's the #1 economy in the country.
That's right. And look, Governor Abbott is a good friend. Governor DeSantis is a good friend. Rick Scott, Rick Perry, former governors. Look, both states have embraced what you and I both believe in: low taxes, low regulations. Fix your tort system, free up the American people to do what they do best. You create wealth, you create jobs, you create prosperity. You let people vote with their feet. Competition is what has made America great. Is what we need in Washington. It's what President Trump is standing for. It's what he's doing with his regulatory policies. It's what he's doing with his executive orders. It's what's happening with DOGE. Congress just needs to get in there and get in the boats and make sure that we're delivering for the president along these same policy lines.
So that's exactly, Chip, why I'm talking to Chip Roy, the congressman from the Austin / San Antonio area of Texas. So let's get right into it, Chip, because there are two things that need to happen, in my opinion, that we need to get out of Congress. We need to get the Trump tax cut made permanent so that people's taxes don't go up by an average of $3,000 next year. And we have to get this outrageous, absurd, obscene budget trimmed, and the debt, which so many of my listeners, I mean, every week they are absolutely apoplectic about what is going on with the overspending in Washington. So much so, Chip, that a lot of them have kind of given up, and they say, we just can't stop Congress from spending. You're one of the people who came to Washington with a sincere desire and continuing desire to get this budget down. Could you give our listeners a sense of what's happening now? We have a Republican House, a Republican Senate, a Republican president. Are we going to see the spending cuts that we want?
Well, Steve, only if we will stand up and have the willpower and the strength to do what we said we would do, because you and I both agree, I think, I don't want to speak for you, that taxes, straight up taxes, they obviously inhibit growth. They take wealth from the people, often immorally, transferring it to government where it is used unwisely and where it, frankly, usually stands in the way of growth. So that tax is burdensome. But so, too, is the tax that is the inflationary tax, the tax that comes from what happens when we print money and spend money that we do not have.
That's
and unfortunately, we've been doing that at record pace. So for all your listeners out there who know the numbers, because they're a smart audience, $36 trillion in debt. We've got roughly $2 trillion a year in deficit spending that we're projected to have in the coming years. And that, by the way, is assuming that the tax cuts expire. So what we're having to do is say, look, we need to make the tax cuts permanent so we can create growth. And by the way, permanence is better than a just extension. So we need to make tax rates permanent for growth. But at the same time, we've got to constrain spending. So why? Also, interest right now is getting refinanced at higher rates. That means that interest payment is going up probably another couple $100 billion a year. We're now over $1 trillion of interest. So we're having that debate in Congress in what's called the reconciliation process, right? And that's where we have to reconcile our tax policy and our mandatory spending policy. Now, I think mandatory is a bad name. It's actually more like automatic spending, right? It's Medicaid, it's some of our veterans payments, obviously Medicare, Social Security, and some things like food stamps are in supposedly mandatory spending. So we have to sit down and say, guys, we're going to have to constrain that spending. And what does that mean? Things like, how about work requirements for Medicaid and for food stamps? That would save $120 billion over 10 years. There are other policies, ending the student loan bailouts. That could save $100 to $250 or $70 billion. There are many other policies. I could go down the list. We've got to do that constraint. And if we do that, and if we do it well, then we'll probably maintain deficits of somewhere in the 1.8 to 2 trillion for a year or two. And then if we can unleash economic growth, then you grow out of that. But we've got to hold those deficits down and reduce them somewhat and then grow. But right now, we're on a path to build the deficits, and we can't do that. So that's why the deficit hawks, the budget hawks, like I am, we're saying, guys, we got to cut spending.
So there's a lot there to chew over. I'm old enough to have had the honor of being friends with Milton Friedman, and Milton Friedman, maybe the greatest economist of the last 100 years, Chip, used to say that spending is taxation. Government spending is taxation. It's just how they're going to pry the money out of you, either through direct taxation or, as you said, by inflating the currency, or I should say eroding the value of the currency, or other ways they can pry money out of you. So if you want to reduce the burden of government, if I understand what you're saying correctly, then you have to cut government spending.
Yes. And in fact, my good friend Russ Vought, who I hope will be confirmed next week as the head of the Office of Management and Budget for President Trump, he and I set out after the unfortunate, 2020 election and all that went around with all of that. In 21, Russ and I sat down, we were on a CPAC panel together. And he and I laid out two reasons for why we need spending restraint. One, of course, is reducing deficit spending and reducing debt, so our interest burden goes down, and we're not having the inflationary pressures of all of the money printing that the Fed does. But the second reason, which is more of a discretionary play, but it's both discretionary and Medicaid and all of it, is that you need to constrain the funding of the bureaucracy. But it is what, frankly, Elon and Doge are attacking as we speak. So we shouldn't be feeding the beast, right? So we gave them this sandbox with all this money. Congress did. And what happened? The bureaucracy grew. Then you've got all of these bureaucrats who don't dare be told that the president is a unitary executive and that they have to do what he says. They think they can do whatever they want, and they can hire more bureaucrats, and they can be incompetent, or they can constrain private activity. They can regulate with reckless abandon. So constraining government spending does two things, right? It shuts off the printing press, which is inflationary, but it also constrains the bureaucracy and the Leviathan, which constrains you and me and the plumber and the home builder and the entrepreneur, all of those people getting constrained by the bureaucrats.
So we've only got about 5 minutes left, so I want to do a little speed round with you and ask you a series of questions kind of quickly, going over what you've already summarized for us. Let's start with this, that President Trump is sort of asserting this authority to not spend money if it's not necessary. And that's caused a lot of people in Washington to hyperventilate. But the way I see it, Chip, if a CEO of a company, if you allocate, say, $100 million for a project, and then you find out, hey, it only cost us $60 million, you don't just go and spend the $100 million. And so I'm with Trump on this, but how do you feel about that?
Yeah, so interestingly, Steve, I have rattled a lot in my belief, importantly, of the importance of Article 1 and that Congress needs to check the president. And look, I'm not shy, maybe to a fault, of, when I disagree with the president, I say so. But guess what? The president is 100% right here. And my friend Russ Vought is 100% right. Impoundment, as it's called, or frankly, just the power of the unitary executive to say, gosh, we shouldn't spend money in this reckless way, or, hey, we can spend 80% of that dollar and give the same result of what Congress is telling us we want to do. You want your executive to do that. It is 100% constitutional. I think it is unconstitutional the extent to which Congress has constricted the executive's authority to save money.
Okay, so you and I see alike on that one. A second one that I wanted to ask you about, we just got a couple minutes left. Okay, I'm against cutting Social Security and Medicare benefits. I'm 64 years old. I'll be, believe it or not, next year I'll be eligible for those programs, although I'm certainly not going to stop working. But my point is, I paid a lot into these programs, as so many of our listeners have. And so I want you to cut. In other words, there's all sorts of fraud and abuse in these programs. Can't we find the savings from that rather than cut people's benefits?
100%. There are two ways that you can get the savings necessary to keep Medicare and Social Security afloat. One, cut the waste and abuse and all of the wasted spending, particularly in Medicare. And number two, with respect to Medicare and Medicaid, is drive the prices of health care down.
Yes.
Through competition in the market, through robust health savings accounts, by putting and empowering doctors and patients, not insurance companies. That will help Medicare and Medicaid as well, because it'll drive prices down.
Okay, and last question. We literally got 45 seconds left. I'm talking to Chip Roy. I'm not in favor of increasing the defense budget. I know some of my listeners disagree with me on this. It seems to me $800 billion is plenty of money, and there's a lot of waste in the Pentagon as well.
There's absolutely waste in the Pentagon. One of my colleagues likes to say the Pentagon should be a square instead of a pentagon, cut 20% of the waste.
Right.
But I will say this, as a conservative, you and I both agree, Reagan, what happened in the 80s, if we need money to make sure we have drones, Iron Dome, whatever we need, fine. Build the assets we need to defend America. But cut the waste, cut the bureaucrats,
there you go.
The civilian workforce. God bless
Well,
America.
Chip, you are a national asset. Thank you for fighting what oftentimes is a lonely fight to shrink the size and scope of our government in Washington.
I've been matchmaking all my life. I introduced my best friend and his wife. I introduced my program director, Kevin Drosch, to Inhala. And now I'm going to match you with Inhala. Yes, you two should sleep together. Skip the sleep center. Avoid the CPAP machine. Get in bed with Inhala. It's a custom-fit oral appliance. There's no bulky hoses or uncomfortable mask. Inhala works with your private medical insurance and makes the process seamless. I talked to the people at Inhala.com, and they're going to help you just like they helped out Kevin and his fiancée. She'll finally be able to sleep through the night while Kevin is using Inhala. Follow Kevin's sleep journey right here on 77 WABC. Now is the time for a treatment that is right for you. Visit Inhala.com or call 844-INHALA-1. That's 844-INHALA-1. So like my program director, Kevin, skip the sleep center, avoid the CPAP machine, get in bed with Inhala. Inhala.com, INHALA.com.